The US Department of Justice is trying to get the private medical records of a bunch of teenage trans kids in New England. One Rhode Island judge said it was ridiculous to think that the Department of Justice was going to interview 14 and 50-year-old trans kids to figure out what their doctors said to them years ago. But then the Department of Justice did something that was kind of scummy. They filed a case in the Northern District of Texas trying to compel a Rhode Island hospital to release records to the federal government, and they won. So now this has set up a fight between courts in New England and a court in Texas for essentially the private records of New England kids. So, how did this case end up before a Texas judge? Well, the answer to that actually is much bigger than just this one case over trans kids. You see, there's a judge in North Texas named Reed O'Connor, and he's been the most powerful man you've never heard of for the last decade. My name is Caitlin Burns. I run burnsnotice.com, and I've been tracking O'Connor's cases for over a decade. You can tell I'm really serious about this YouTube thing because I put a bra on for this. So, how does one judge get this much power? Well, the simple answer is through a well known legal mechanism called venue shopping. And he's also very conservative. He's basically been groomed to give the most conservative opinions possible. And every case goes to him. There's no randomness, no rotation, no chance of drawing a different judge. So, once a case lands in O'Connor's court, what can he do about it? Well, he can issue a nationwide injunction, basically putting a stop to whatever the policy is throughout the country. So this one judge gets to have power over the 330 million other Americans. This isn't just about trans kids or whatever liberal cause is before him. He's done this in countless cases where conservative parties needed an emergency stop to something. And a lot of times his cases end up before the Supreme Court. And the important thing to remember with legal cases is whatever happens in the district judge kind of sets the pace for how the rest of the case will be heard in the appeals process and also at the Supreme Court. I talked to my friend Peter Shamshiri from the 5-4 podcast and If Books Could Kill, and he told me that he's a point of leverage in the system for the right. They go to him when they need the judgment. This isn't a bug. It's kind of a feature at this point. Conservatives know it. They use the system to their advantage. O'Connor has like a decade long record of just making really important decisions on the behalf of everybody else, and there's no way to get him out of power. He's not elected, and he has a lifetime appointment. So let me walk you through some of his more famous cases. The case that put O'Connor on my radar was actually a Title IX case. But anytime I see a ridiculous court ruling, chances are it was O'Connor. The Obama administration issued a rule saying that Title IX should be interpreted to include trans people. Basically, the rule determined that it was an undue burden to trans students to make them use bathrooms of their gender assigned at birth, or to make them use a neutral bathroom like a staff bathroom, because typically those are further away from classrooms than like a student bathroom would. And conservatives went to court to stop this, and they went to O'Connor, and O'Connor gave them the judgment they wanted. He issued a nationwide injunction basically overruling Obama, overruling the executive branch and putting a stop to it. And the thing is, the injunction worked immediately. Trans students all of a sudden lost their right to use the right bathroom while the case worked its way through the court system. O'Connor's most famous ruling was probably when he ruled the entire Affordable Care Act as unconstitutional. This was in 2018. Even conservative legal scholars at the time said that his decision was embarrassingly bad. But here's the other part of the Reed O'Connor story that you might not know about. His district court is overseen by the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. And if you know anything about the federal court system, you know that the Fifth Circuit is kind of like the black sheep. They're stocked with conservative ideologues, and they're just as likely to produce a batshit decision as O'Connor is. So a lot of the times they will rubber stamp something that O'Connor ruled, and then the only way to stop it is through the Supreme Court. And that's what happened here with this Affordable Care Act ruling. It went to the Fifth Circuit and they upheld O'Connor's judgment. And then it went to the Supreme Court. It was hotly contested. And then the Supreme Court reversed it. They had a 7-2 decision overturning O'Connor's judgment. And they ruled that it was constitutional and that O'Connor had it wrong. And this is basically the only way that O'Connor can be overruled in the court system is by the Supreme Court, which since 2018 has gotten even more conservative. So it's harder and harder to put a check on this guy. But even then, by the time that it was reversed, the damage had already been done. It was a years long court battle, and it allowed conservatives time to start dismantling individual parts of the ACA, like the individual mandate. And it's a shell of what it once could have been. Another famous case of his is he one time he tried to make it so that religious employers were exempt from Title VII employment, like non-description protections. So basically, if you're a place like Hobby Lobby and you're an owner of a company and you have strong religious objections to LGBT people, you should be allowed to exclude them. He ruled that actually those employers can discriminate, and he ruled that the EEOC can't even investigate matters like this. That's an example of him taking it one step further. He's not just stopping something, he's making right wing people immune to the law. There's a famous saying about conservatism that it consists of exactly one proposition, to wit, there must be in groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out groups whom the law binds but does not protect. And this is the ethos that's central to O'Connor's judicial judgment. If you're conservative, the law shouldn't apply to you. You should get an exemption from the law. If you're one of the conservative targets, if you're part of the out group, if you're trans, if you are poor and need health care, or if you belong to the wrong religion, too bad. No more government protections for you. That case was particularly egregious because it not only barred the government from doing something about discrimination, it barred them from even looking at it in the first place. There's an interesting case in Braidwood v. Becerra in 2023. And in that case, he ruled that the requirement that insurance companies cover preventative services like giving people PrEP, which is the anti HIV transmission drug, was unconstitutional because he said that the advisory committee setting guidelines was improperly appointed. This guy's slick. Basically, this is lawyer speak for they didn't do it the right way. So this is the only way that O'Connor could come to the judgment that he wanted to. It's technically creative and ideologically motivated, and it's designed to reach up through the entire healthcare system, not just one policy. But this is the same pattern as before: nationwide injunction, and the policy is frozen until everybody can figure out what's going on in the legal system. Elon Musk's X, formerly Twitter, in their developer agreement, they require you to go file a case in Reed O'Connor's court just to challenge them legally. And here's the thing: O'Connor is a shareholder in SpaceX and Tesla. The fix is in. And that brings me back to this Rhode Island case. Uh, the DOJ is going around to these blue states trying to get these private medical records of literal children because the Trump administration thinks that gender affirming care for youth shouldn't exist. Now, I am a trans person. I obviously have my biases here. I don't see how you can look at the government trying to go in and invade the privacy of patients at any hospital for any reason as a reasonable gesture of the healthcare system. It's an overreach. This has gone beyond policy and into the private lives of children who don't even live in Texas, where O'Connor is practicing law. Like, what the hell, man? I think the thing that I want to say here is O'Connor is not a rogue actor in any sense. He's a product of the system that we have. He was a former counsel to Orrin Hatch and John Cornyn. He's a Federalist Society lifer. Earlier in this video, I said that 9 times out of 10, when I see a ridiculous legal decision, I take a guess that it was O'Connor, and I'm usually right. But this is a problem that's growing and growing. There's this guy, Matt Kazmarak, who's also in North Texas, and he's probably even crazier than O'Connor, the guy, but he's now doing the same type of operation that O'Connor has. So if you file a case in North Texas, you're going to get one of these guys most likely. Within this legal fight between these New England federal judges and O'Connor, the US government is like trying to vie for a win and control and justification for using O'Connor as their judge. So what they've started doing is they've turned to the US Attorney's Office in North Texas to start investigating for these files. And they're turning to criminal subpoenas rather than civil. And that justifies going to O'Connor's court. But here's the thing about the US Attorney's Office in North Texas, it's filled with former clerks of O'Connor. So this office is basically all O'Connor proteges. What the hell, man? Here's the frustrating thing. In the Rhode Island case, the first district, which represents New England, and is filled with liberal judges, not completely, but the First Circuit Court held a panel to decide what to do with this, and they still sided with O'Connor. So these poor families in New England are sitting there, their kids' private medical records now sitting in the office of this ridiculously conservative judge in North Texas. The Trump appointee on the First Circuit panel wrote that the New England court has no jurisdiction over North Texas. Well, why does North Texas have jurisdiction over New England, man? Huh? Make that make sense. This is an escalation for O'Connor. Before, he was issuing injunctions, he was shepherding in pet causes of the conservative cause. Now he's acting as de facto member of the executive branch, reaching their tentacles into blue states to try to enforce Trump's agenda. At this point, it's not venue shopping, it's court shopping on behalf of the federal government. And that's what makes this a serious problem. That's what makes O'Connor different from everybody else. Now, you might be thinking, well, Caitlin, doesn't everybody venue shop? Isn't that just part of being a good lawyer, is finding the most advantageous court? Yeah, leftist people do it too. Liberals do it too. Yes, I admit that. But there's an asymmetry here. Conservatives have this one court. It's basically purpose built to advance their agenda. The left doesn't have an equivalent. This is the activist judges that conservatives have been warning about, except he's on their side. There's a difference between occasional venue shopping and having this one guy be like a key cog in the system to make sure that everything is copacetic legally. The left might find a sympathetic judge somewhere, but the right has a guarantee in O'Connor. That's not the same thing. As long as this situation persists, the right will always have this one court to go to file cases where they are guaranteed to win. They can oppose any federal policy they want. They can overrule any Democratic president. They can uphold their own conservative policies. This is one judge, one courtroom with the power to rule over the entire country. O'Connor might not be able to launch a drone attack in Iran on a bunch of schoolgirls, but on domestic policy, he could basically do whatever he wants. He's more powerful than the president. And if this Rhode Island case is allowed to stand, the DOJ will essentially have this one guy who can rat out any other court in the country. That can't be allowed to keep happening. This isn't about trans rights, Title IX, or the ACA. Those are just O'Connor's casualties so far. This structure can be pointed at anything. Today it's trans people, tomorrow it could be you. Anything a future Democratic president wants to accomplish, they have to get through O'Connor first. And that doesn't seem right. I realize that I might sound a little bit like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the conspiracy board. Just like, look at this guy. But you start to see the pattern over time. You start to see the structure that is allowing these ridiculous cases to go through. This video is just a taste of what he's been doing. If you want the full breakdown, it's in this week's Burns Notice. The link is in the description.